everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with life science companies from across the globe over the past 13 years to help them with everything from virtual advisory boards, digital medical education, online investigator meetings, and everything in between. And since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've also been helping pharma companies with doing things like MSL and large Salesforce training, innovation hackathons. We've been doing things like large corporate events and all kinds of other really creative online programs. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare thought leaders, we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited to having one of these thought leaders, digital thought provocateurs, at the table with me today. And this is actually Dr. Sabita Sankar. Dr. Sabita Sankar leads business development at a company called HUMA.AI. There, she's focused on empowering their pharma clients with strategic business intelligence that comes from multiple areas, including fragmented and unstructured data sources, as well as helping customers transform complex analytical problems that they get into that are sort of tangible, and giving them sort of really tangible and impact-oriented business solutions from the data they provide. Dr. Sankar obtained her PhD from the Institute of Molecular and Cell Biology in Singapore. She completed her postdoctoral fellowships at Yale as well as at Duke universities. She then spent the next several years at Celgene as group leader in the oncology research department. Prior to joining HUMA.AI, she spent several years in both the scientific affairs and business development roles at several diagnostic companies. These included companies such as Molecular MD, Biodesics, and Ambry Genetics, providing genomic and proteomic solutions to pharma clients. Welcome, Sabita. So happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Natalie. Well, I'm so excited to be on this show.
Absolutely. Such an exciting and decorated background. Love the route that you've taken. It's been really colorful and really interesting. Maybe you can take us through really briefly on the trajectory you have taken in your career and how you landed in this fascinating company that you're working in today.
Yes, so as you mentioned, right, I started really in discovery work, right? So I worked at Celgene, worked on drug, development programs, and then really saw the unmet need in terms of diagnostics, right? Because we had discovered a biomarker for our mTOR program, and there wasn't a diagnostic test available. So spent the next 10 years or so in diagnostic space. So understand the whole diagnostic space, matching drugs with patients, right? And then the most recent experience was at Ambry Genetics doing germline testing. And that's where I got into the whole space of rare diseases, right? Where the diagnostic journey for these rare disease patients is like 7-8 years, right? And all that data is all, buried in unstructured data, right? So how do you actually empower these patients with data that's all buried in silos and it's all unstructured data, right? And that's where I saw the aha moment that really using data analytics is going to power, pharma companies and users, patients with data, right? Insights that they can leverage to make better informed decisions. And then I got an opportunity to work with HUMA.AI with Lana Fang and Greg Costello. And when I saw the company and I saw what they were doing, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a huge opportunity, right? This is the way we can transform healthcare, leveraging data and doing it at scale. And this is why I joined Humai.AI, and I joined in 2020, and it's been like, it's learning, right? It's learning every time about everybody's problems, right? The problems they're dealing with and how machine learning can actually help them. So we want to help the end user with leveraging data. That's our mission.
Yeah, so as we hear this over and over and again, it's almost become a bit cliche, but data is the new oil. It's the new the new energy source. Everything, the machine learning and the algorithms gobble up data, and this is how it gets smarter. So maybe actually you can just sort of explain in a nutshell what HUMA.AI is, How are people interacting with it? Is it a person? Is it a service? Is it an app? So maybe you can describe what it is.
So we are a venture-backed enterprise SaaS company. It's a platform solution, right? So the idea is we want to deploy the solutions at scale, right? And so what we do is we leverage machine learning to extract out data analytics for the end users to make better informed decisions. So it's leveraging machine learning to extract out business intelligence out of their data. And we want to empower the subject matter experts who are not data scientists, right? To get data, to get answers to their questions. So it's very much like an easy to use platform so that end users can get answers to their questions.
So let's actually paint the picture so that we almost have a before and after. Before AI, and we're going to dissect each of these components so that we can break them down into components. Before AI and all of these great fancy algorithms and platforms, we have medical affairs departments. I think many people here have probably some idea about what medical affairs is, but maybe we can just sort of give a brief explanation of before and the before times, the pre-data times. What were these medical affairs people doing? What was their problems? What were the challenges? And what did they do with data, and how were they interacting with the data that was around them?
Yeah, this is actually a very good example, because what happened during COVID was that everybody was now doing everything remotely, right? So think about it, they're sitting at their desk in front of the computer. It's very lonely, right? So think about it. So a tool that can help them empower, right? So that they can get answers to their questions just at their fingertips, right? How powerful is that? So the way we build our platform is an easy to use platform. It's an Alexa-like question and answer platform, right? And what are we trying to solve for them? Right now, they had to do everything manually, right? So think about it. And I'm so empathetic towards medical affairs because there's a deluge of data, right? So they have their CRM, they have all this insights data that's buried in their CRM, but it's all unstructured data. The way they are doing it, or they've been doing it for the longest time, is doing manual, right? So manually, they have group teams that generate like monthly reports on the insights. Then they look at it and then they decide, what do I do next with this insights? And it's not just those insights. There's multiple different data sources that they have to get business intelligence. So it's their private data, plus they use public data, right? So PubMed, clinical trials, real world data. So it's multiple different data sources that they have to get insights. How difficult is that to do, right? By a human being, right? So that's the power of machine learning, because it can leverage that natural language processing to go to all these different data silos, unstructured data, right? That it's in free text notes, and get business intelligence out of it. And it's starting with the question they want to get answered. So that if we'll go through like what is unique about our platform, but that's how we're empowering the medical affairs.
So what we're really saying here, Sabita, is that in the old world, or in some regards, some people are still there.
Yes.
We're just on the precipice of engaging AI, and so it's a very, very new area. But the way we are either currently or have been doing it is that teams and swaths of teams,
Yes.
either at affiliates or global levels, they're going to these mega conferences, they're compiling huddle groups, they're putting together this data, that data, they're checking their CRMs or advisory board data, other insights from clinicaltrials.gov and other sort of PubMed, and they're trying to make sense of the world in their own capacity, in their own time. There's only so much time in the world, and they're putting together these reports. Yes. Now comes HUMA.AI, and they're saying we can actually put like speed boots on you. Is like, you're still going to do this stuff, but you're going to do it bigger and faster. So tell us about the data entry. So I guess one of the first things that people are going to say is, does this mean that with HUMA.AI that my job is gone? Like my role, which was originally consolidating all of this information in great reports, does that mean I'm no longer needed? What do you tell people when they say, wow, I put acceleration boots on you, we don't need you? How do you respond to people who are concerned about their jobs?
So think about it. We just reduce all that manual labor for all that curation time to reduce the time to what subject matters are, the experts are. digesting that pieces of information and discovering what's the next best action. So your time is actually spent on valuable insights that humans can do what we're really good at, right? So the platform solution is not to replace humans, it's to augment humans, right? So you don't spend your time doing all that laborious manual curation and putting things together. You get those insights and then you decide on what do I need to act on, right? So we take all these unstructured data that is all over the place into some quantifiable, trends and stuff like that, that you can actually then analyze and make decisions, better informed decisions based on the data. That's
So let's
actually empowering.
yeah, it's very exciting. So let's actually just tease apart these data sources. So, I mean, some of the ones that come to mind, we just went over, spieled a whole bunch. Everybody's got a CRM system of some sort. So customer relationship management system. People are using PubMed, they're using clinicaltrials.gov. They might have digital advisory boards. And just be really honest, I'm a little bit of a commercial for Impetus. This is what Impetus does. And we actually have transcript reports and analysis and recommendations report. These are unstructured data. And they're getting these bits and pieces from multiple places. Let's actually just talk about the data. Is there a current issue with the data sources that are out there? Is there intrinsic issues with the amount, the quality, what they say? What are you talking to clients about right now about the issues with the data that they already have?
So one of the challenge in a lot of companies is sometimes they don't even know where all the different data is, right? Because they don't have a process to put all the data together, right? And then coordinating so that this is one place where you can get the data, right? So it's part of organizing the data so that we know where to access the data. But one of the important things that our approach, which is different from a lot of other companies, is that we don't try to look at the data in totality and say, oh, what is the data telling me, right? What we do is we start with that human intelligence, like, what do I want to know out of this data? What is the pressing question that I need to get answered? Based on that, right, because we use natural language processing upfront to disambiguate that question into a pipeline of operations and go to the right data source, right? So it's very much driven by the question. So we go to the specific data source to answer that question. That actually allows us to really build accuracy into our models. So it's an accurate model, you get an accurate answer. That is so important for subject matter experts, right? Because we're talking about really smart scientists, and they want to go make sure that the model is accurate. So that actually really is very important for the end user, right? That you are actually going to the right data source to get the answer. So it's really important to understand the business rule on how to derive that answer to the question.
So one of the very first things that you're saying is that if you're working with a new client, the first thing is aggregation and consolidation of the disparate multitude of omni-channels and sources that they have of data. So you're going to be helping the client pull this all together, get this into the Human.AI portal, privately encrypted portal that they get now access. So no, everything is in here. Okay. So now we've got this, like, everything's all in different places, but now it's just multiple data, but it's in this new place. And then you're saying the next best thing that you're doing is now you have to ask the right questions.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how your company, do you provide the services or the consultative piece on how to ask the right questions? Because sometimes asking the right questions is the most difficult piece of the entire pie.
I agree. I agree totally, because if you're new to this whole machine learning, sometimes it's difficult to figure out what types of questions to ask. So we actually help them formulate the types of questions that make sense in terms of what data source we are trying to extract the business intelligence out of. That's a really important step. And when you're successful, then you have these aha moments where you ask some tough questions and you were able to extract that business intelligence out of that unstructured
Is there
data.
ever concerns about bias, either A, in the data that was compiled based on people's, I mean, we can hear this, this could be a whole other diatribe and a whole other show on intrinsic bias and cognitive bias, but is in the data that's compiled, is there intrinsic bias? And secondly, is there bias in the questions that are asked? How do you try to diversify it so it's as objective and scientifically minded as possible to get you the answers you need?
So some of the things that we do, which I think is really important, is to not introduce any bias from our machine learning algorithm, right? So what we do is we have, when we provide the answer, we have explainable AI. So you understand exactly the business rule on how we derive that answer. And then we have a feedback loop so that the end user can provide feedback on a thumbs up or thumbs down feature to let us know whether they don't think that's accurate. You may have missed something, or you didn't understand this lingo or something, because, you know, healthcare has a lot of different terms, right, that you have to understand. And then we provide feedback so that the machine learning scientists can then update the model, right? So that's really important. And then the other critical thing also is that sometimes the data is actually missing. And we can figure it out because we can't find the answer, and we say, oh, we could not find the answer. And that's actually another important QC step, right? Because when you're trying to put all the data together, it's very hard to have a high level overview whether you miss some pieces of data in your data lake or whatever you're leveraging.
Absolutely. So it sounds really, really interesting. I love how you're really kind of teaching, if you will, the AI over time based on these really smart questions, the feedback loop, and then it just, so maybe you can actually describe to the group here who are listening or watching how you leverage terms like natural language processing, like terms like machine learning. This always sounds like some nebulous abstract concept, but there's really something behind the science of that. So you start off with data sets, you start off with some initial smart questions. How does that loop work? And is the machine or the answers or whatever this entity that we're calling human.ai for this company, is it the same on day one as it is in maybe day 200?
That's a very good point. So we're continuously learning, right? That's the power of machine learning. As we do different projects, we learn and we build like our own internal humor brain, right? Because we are doing different projects. And the way we start off when we do start off with a new project, we start off with the questions, right? So based on the question, we define business rules to how to get to that answer, right? So it's a pipeline of operations that we develop. And then what the other important thing is that we actually do multiple iterations, and we have subject matter experts to QC the model. This is so critical in healthcare because there are a lot of companies out there that can do machine learning, but when you want to do it for healthcare, you really have to have that coexistence of the subject matter experts working closely with the NLP scientists to make sure that the first few iterations are accurate. And then we provide that, you know, URL to the client to then do some testing and provide real-time feedback. So that's really a critical step to make sure that the model you develop is accurate. So it's math, right? It's a series of business rules and pipeline of operations. At the front end with natural,
and it keeps working on it, and you keep iterating and pivoting and changing as things change and evolve.
Yes, and it gets smarter and smarter. And so once you develop the model and you make it very scalable, then you can cut and paste and put in different diseases, different drugs or whatever. That's the beauty of it. That's the part about it's scalable, right? And when I mean, there's so many aha moments that we've had, right? Where it's like, wow, you just put in a different sponsor, your different drug, and it just works and you get the answers. This is so powerful.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly powerful. And it's just, we're on the precipice. I mean, just getting started in this, and companies are just jumping in. And so we have this opportunity of getting data. We have all these data sources. It's a possibility now that we can be endless data sources. Tell us a little bit about the company's viewpoint on interoperability. Once you start getting into a myriads of channels of data, we now start running into issues of compatibility, and then this concept of structured versus unstructured. Tell us a little bit about interoperability.
So again, so this is where we've done, you know, where we've connected different data silos, right? They don't normally talk to each other. So I can give you an example in medical affairs where you have your internal private data, and then you have some external data, like you say, like social media or like public data like PubMed and clinicaltrials.gov. They don't talk to each other, but because of the platform is starting with the question, right? So based on the question, you have to go to the specific data sources to get the answer. So then you link these different data sources that were not talking together before, but because the business rule requires you to talk to these 4 different data sources to get that one particular answer, we map it to the different data sources. That's how you get that higher order business intelligence. That's really powerful, right?
It
No,
is
normally you just
incredibly
use
powerful.
one, it's like isolated.
So, a lot of people who might be familiar, for example, with things like search engine optimization and the use of like long-tailed keywords and things like that. I'm not getting into the complexity of it, but one would draw the similar conclusion about the kinds of questions that you could ask. How complex can they be? So I'm just going to sort of step aside for a second, just talk about something that just happened today or a few days ago, and that is Google released something called a multitask unified model. Long story short, using specific type of generative type of types of algorithms, if you will, that counter each other to be able to have you add like a long-tailed complex question and then being able to pull from multiple disparate systems. Is this something that will be intrinsically built into the Huma.AI platform as well?
That's what we're working towards too. Yes. So what we're trying to do is make it as easy to use, right? Because if you think about it, when you ask a specific question, sometimes people put, different ways of asking the question. We are building it to make it very flexible because again, the barrier of adoption is the ease of use. And if you look at our platform, it's easy to use. I can tell you an example where we onboarded 50 users and they started using it while we're doing the demo. So it's that easy to use, right?
Yeah.
And that will reduce the barrier of adoption because we're not talking about data scientists, right, that we want to empower. We're talking end users, like a scientist, like a HCP or a patient, whatever, that want to make it something that they can familiarize and use it immediately and just get answers to their questions. We want to liberate that part, right? So we want to make everybody be able to just make better informed decisions and make it easy to use.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really interesting because what is also unique about Huma.AI, which might not be with some more complicated analytics tools, is that somebody in the analytics or resource department is, filtering and consolidating and curating and sending these things in reports, which still is even happening with AI. You're suggesting that this is a self-serve. I'm an MSL, I'm a medical advisor, I'm who knows what at the company, and I can go into the system and ask my questions using the data that the company has consolidated, and I can get my answers. So do you see that as an advantage or a disadvantage of the complex types of reporting that could happen when a smaller department is navigating and curating the information in an AI platform?
So what's the nice thing where we can build features is that it depends on who the end user is, right? So think about a medical affairs, you have the field team, then you have the managers, then you have the directors, and then you have the VPs. We can configure to what data they can see. And we can see the user behavior, which is really interesting, right? Because the field medical team, right, they just want to know things that are affecting them. But then at a higher level, they want to see overall what's happening. And the power is that you can share that data. Can you imagine? Because right now with COVID, everything is like siloed, right? A platform that can unify, and so multiple people can see it in real time rather than waiting for a monthly report or a quarterly report. That's really important, right? So think about it. That's what I think is really exciting.
I'm just curious if anybody has approached Huma.ai and asked this question, and that is, a company ends up having its silo of data sets that they think are relevant, important, and compelling for their business. And then you actually compare this to this gigantic billion bits or trillion, I don't even know what number you can say, of bits of data that's located in a Google search, right? So I'm MSL and I'm typing this in a Google search versus the Huma.ai platform that my company owns. What is the difference in the efficacy or the accuracy of the information that's coming back to me in my search?
It's all about the accuracy, right? Because you're only looking at the data that is relevant. So, and we have built machine learning models to make sure that the models are accurate. So it's sort of like a Google for your private data, but what you get at the end of the day. So if you think about it, when you do a Google search, you have to look at all the different output and go one by one and look at it, right? Our platform is that when you ask that question, it's only going to go to the data sources that are relevant to answer your question. And you know you will get accuracy to a certain level because we built the models. And then we are going to be continuously learning based on your feedback to actually enhance that model. So it's a feedback loop, it's a living system, and it's for your private data, which could be your private data plus whatever public data you want to connect. So it's really very customized to your needs, right?
So it's really interesting because I'm wondering about companies like platforms like HUMA.AI, if AI has actually democratized search. So getting away from these big behemoths, if we're now talking about these uber customized, uber specialized search engines at a company by company and potentially one day human to human level. So what's your thoughts on that?
That would be so empowering. Think about it. I mean, this is where the vision is, right? Democratizing it so that it's only not for certain select people. Everybody can use it. I can tell you, I'm so excited about some of the solutions that we've leveraged on public data sources, right? Like PubMed and clinical trials. They are very difficult to use, right? From day one. And we've come up with solutions that you can actually extract information. And like I said, reduce all that manual labor part of it and just look at the relevant papers or relevant trials that you need to monitor, right? And that could be, the end user could be anybody, right? Could be a patient, could be anybody that can use it. And it's easy to use, right?
So what's really interesting here, Sabita, is that we've actually talked about this idea about being able to find relevant and important and highly credible responses to your individualized questions. And now you have these answers in this portal using this really customized, company-centric or brand-centric platform using your smart AI. The next question comes down to the output or the so what. So people have all these grandiose thoughts, as things come back, they could share it with their colleagues, but somebody has to now uber consolidate findings, or this is where the human element comes in, or not, is how do we now translate that into something and translate data into information, into intelligence. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are around, getting the clinicaltrials.gov, these new, PubMed, these exhaustive areas where you get thousands and thousands of things back. What are you doing as a solution for people to help them in that process of transferring data into intelligence?
So one of the key things that a lot of people do is they have to do literature surveillance, right? So either they're monitoring their KOLs or they're monitoring publications related to a specific disease area, or for diagnostic companies or medical devices, they have to monitor information about their product, their intended use, or their, what's been discussed or published about their products, right? So an intelligent way is to have these ready-made like reports, right, of this done in real time, right? So you can get it anytime that you want to see a report, because you just ask the question and you'll get a report on a particular disease area, a particular product, whatever it is, in real time. And that reduces all that manual labor. The other aha moment is that we figured out that using machine learning versus the traditional PubMed searches where you just use keyword searches, right? You don't get all the articles, right? That's the limitation of using keyword search. That's the power of machine learning. It's beyond keyword search. You actually get more papers than you would have with the PubMed search. So that's that false positive that you missed out some of these papers that you need to monitor. So that's the important part about PubMed. Clinicaltrials.gov, you can get critical information that you can't get out right now because there's a lot of business intelligence in the unstructured information, right? Structured, you can know how many trials, you can know sponsors, but getting it all together in one way that, like you can get graphical representations of top sponsors, top competitive sites, right? Things about inclusion criteria, you cannot get it right now. It's impossible. So then you make decisions based on those business intelligence that you wanted to get out of this clinicaltrials.gov.
Which is really, really brilliant. We've been hearing a lot recently about some really interesting technology that I know a lot of companies are dabbling with, and it's generative pre-trained transformer 3, or the GPT-3, which for other people who may not know that sort of technical term, it's sort of this smart algorithm that does the curation, the gathering of, structured and unstructured data, and creates prose, writes articles, computer programs, does artwork. Tell us, Sabita, is this technology that you are considering leveraging? Is this an additional component, module, whatever, of HUMA.AI that people can not only find this curated data, but it actually compiles things into informational packages, if you will, or curated articles and reports?
So this is something we haven't thought of yet, right? In terms of giving curated reports out. We can get reports out of our platform where we can generate a report like that so that you can monitor. Some of the things we heard about GP3, that it's like trained on a certain set, it doesn't like iterate or grow, right? I think the most important thing is having a living system that's continuously learning, and that's our platform. From the users, right?
It's a beautiful thing. So let's actually talk about some use cases here as we're thinking out loud. So we've talked a lot about exhaustively about literature management, watching what's going on about your brand competitors and staying afloat of all of that. And so the reports and intelligence and basically helping companies strategically plan what they're doing with their products and brands, both medical, payers, et cetera.
Yeah.
But let's also talk about clinical discovery, clinical trials. How can the Huma.AI platform help people who are trying to do recruitment and management and sustainment and development of either trials or discovering new target product profiles?
So one of the things, like I mentioned, was like looking at your clinicaltrials.gov and looking at inclusion criteria. So is the inclusion criteria sort of a barrier from you, preventing you from recruiting patients, right? Because you have very stringent inclusion criteria, sometimes you're going to miss out patients, right? So, and then you can get business intelligence about how many changes you made to the protocol, which means there were problems with your protocol. What trials are using now? The in thing is telemedicine, things like that, right? So those are the kind of like interesting information that you can extract out of clinicaltrials.gov, right? Figuring out what other sponsors have been using in terms of their inclusion criteria and compare yours against theirs.
Can it help with companies find potential patients? I'm just thinking about claims data, electronic health records, maybe to accelerate recruitment for difficult to recruit trials. I'm thinking specifically about rare diseases.
Yeah, that would be also leveraging other pieces of data, right? So I think beyond clinicaltrials.gov, you want to look at real world data. You want to use other pieces of data to try to find populations where there's unmet need, right? So right now there's a lot of discussions about diversity, inclusion, and stuff like that. You need to be able to access the data. I think some of the challenges there are privacy issues, right? Because once you start going very nitty gritty into patient information, there needs to be compliance because you really have to protect the patient information.
Are you going to be increasing your data port or APIs? Again, we talked about interoperability, but partnerships and collaborations with some of the big tech companies that are getting very involved in the pharma space. And I'm thinking about like the Apple smartwatch. I'm thinking about Fitbits. I'm thinking about Oura Ring, 24-hour glucose monitors. How open is your system going to be to sort of be as inclusive with as many data sets as possible?
We actually have worked with a medical device company that was trying to leverage our platform to be able to get insights on the patients when they visit the patients, right? So like I said, it's endless possibility, right? It's just to figure out where we want to focus to scale, right? So that's the beauty of our platform. It can be used in multiple different use cases. And we've actually heard all these different use cases, right? Just by talking to our clients.
So what are some of the exciting use cases that like you're most inspired by?
So a lot of it is being empathetic towards the end user, right? So it's all this manual labor that they have to go through, right? So I'm giving you examples where, like I said, the PubMed one, because they manually have to look at all these papers one by one to figure out whether it's relevant. Can you imagine how many hours of work that is? And we just extract the relevant and they just look at which ones, we reduce all that upfront manual labor, and then the subject matter, what they're really good at is figuring out whether this is what I need to follow up or not. Then we can do trending, right? And we can do dashboards and stuff. So there's a metrics, right, for all this unstructured data that they can monitor. That's really important because that's the business intelligence. Clinicaltrials.gov, I mentioned again, where this whole issue is that all this data is buried, right? You cannot get an overview of all the competitors in one place, right? You have to look each trial by itself. So we can empower you with information, then you can make decisions on how you want to plan your next trial, right? Because if you're a third or fourth follower in a disease area, right, with a drug, then you better be much more intelligent about your clinical trial design because you're competing with other sites for patients and stuff. We can extract all that business intelligence for our clients. And the third one, which we did, I think most recently, which I think is it's so painful when you look at what the end user has to do, is looking at regulatory documents. So have you downloaded like from drugs at PDF? They're all these huge PDFs, right? And we've gone through the journey with the end user. These guys have to manually look at all these PDFs, find the region that they're interested, and they can't even compare across different drugs. So what if machine learning can do that? And we've done that. And it's like the aha moment, you just reduce all these hours that I had to do to look at all this manually. And then now I just look at the region of interest, those relevant sections, and QC and figure out whether they're relevant for me to monitor and figure out what I would the next steps. That's huge because it's really painful. I mean, we've gone through the journey with our clients, right? So
yeah, so very exciting frontiers with AI and being able to eventually add some of these success metrics on company scorecards, including, time saved, potentially impacts on the top and bottom line and P&Ls. It's going to be very interesting to see the impact that AI will have in the future. So with all of that said, what are your predictions on the future of AI, machine learning, natural language processing in pharma?
So I think we're going through the phase where there are a lot of pharma that are dabbling in it, right? So we'll get through that hump. And I think people will start seeing the use cases that, wow, this actually makes a difference, right? So we're going to see a trajectory of where companies are going to adopt machine learning and actually use it and get, business intelligence and show productivity, using AI methods. That's going to happen. That whole sector is going to grow in healthcare. Healthcare is the most difficult one because it's not easy to use and it's not for the faint-hearted, right? You cannot just say, I'm a machine learning and I'm going to do healthcare. It doesn't work that way. Like Google Learn, it's just difficult to implement in healthcare because there's so many nuances. But once you can do it, and we figured out that we know how to do this because we brought in, subject matter and NLP working closely, we know we've got a successful model, right? How do we scale it?
So what's next for you and human.ai?
So we've already, like I said, we spent a year or so figuring out all the different pain points, right? We've landed on some good, use cases where we know that we are ready to scale, right? So we are at that stage of scaling. We want to make sure that it gets adopted and people use it and they know the power of machine learning that's going to help them get insights on the data and make data informed decisions. So we want to scale it. So we would, from my experience in the rare disease space is that there are 8,000 rare diseases. You cannot just do one by one. You have to have a platform solution. You have to have a scalable solution. That's how you transform healthcare. Beautiful. And we want to do that.
Love it. I'm excited about what Huma.ai is doing. For anybody listening or watching the show today, and you're interested in connecting with Sabita, finding out more about what you can do, how you could partner, how you could collaborate, or include this amazing new AI into your medical affairs department or just in your company in general, we will be leaving her details and contact information in the show notes below. Also, if you enjoy this conversation, we encourage you to check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations, the kind of work, the kind of ideas that we do in our asynchronous online touchpoints portal with your payers, physicians, allied healthcare providers, investigators. We work together in a series of asynchronous and synchronous touchpoints that Impetus helps you with our white glove service so that you can move these plans, plan how you're going to integrate a new AI platform into your team, how to integrate it. And then from there, having discussions about once you get all these great insights from a Huma.ai, how are you going to leverage this? And in addition, the insights that you get from your advisors, you can actually use in Humai.AI so that you can actually continue the feedback loop of unstructured data that they can actually use. So we encourage you to check it out. We'd love you to like and subscribe to our channel. And we would really appreciate if you could leave us some feedback on iTunes. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. And thank you, Dr. Sabita Sankar, for a fantastic conversation.
And thank you, Natalie, for the invite. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.